Is something not right?
Okay, now it's good. I don't know, for some reason, I wasn't hearing you before.
Oh, I wasn't saying anything.
You, I'm sorry?
I wasn't saying anything.
Oh, no, because nobody, no, I was asking. Okay, whatever.
Okay.
Anyway, it seems to have solved the problem.
Okay.
Okay, all right. So we'll do the live stream and we'll get started. Okay, does everybody hear me?
Yes.
Good. Okay, well, now you have arrested Rabbi. So now I can teach you much better.
It never
Okay.
happens to you, Rabbi. It never happens.
You've never seen it, but it does happen actually.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, if you lived in New York, you would see it. Okay. From Texas, you're not going to see it. Okay, so anyway, here we go. Let's get started. Okay. Okay, my markers are here on the Chuba of the Rajba, so I guess we'll start from there. Unless somebody knows better than me where we stopped. Okay, whatever. That's what my computer says. So anyway, כתוב בתשובת הרשב"א, says in the Rashba, מי שיש לו לפניו פת נקייה, right? So he has, right, person, he has nice clean bread, right? Ve'afat, good bread, good quality stuff. שאינו צריך לליפתן, so it doesn't need any relish, right? Because it tastes good, fine without it. ובירך עליה המוציא. So what did he do? He blessed המוציא, ודעתו לאוכלה עם הליפתן. And he wants to eat it with some relish also. ואחר שבצע אמר הביאו ליפתן. And then, after he broke the bread, then he said, okay, bring the relish. אם צריך לחזור ולברך. Question is, does he have to now go back and bless again? Why? Because he didn't taste the bread yet, and he started to talk. Oh my God. Oh. So is this like a blunder? Right? Or is it tolerable, this thing? So he answers, Kivan she'eno tzarich leliftan ima, right? This is still the question, right? since he doesn't need really the relish, he doesn't really need it. Also, that's the basis of the question. You know what I mean? I'll explain to you what I mean. That we already said, like beforehand, when we started this chapter, that if a person says, right, b'diavad, bring the relish, bring the salt, we can tolerate that, b'diavad. Why? Because it's part of the process here, right? You need that to make the blessing and so forth, so on. But here the question is, but here, he doesn't really need the relish because the bread is clean. So now the question is, since he talked about something which is not really necessary for this process, so is that considered to be an interruption? Now he has to, right, to bless again. So here we go, right? Now that was the question. Here we go with the answer. Teshuvah, right? Says the Rashba, he answers, Im keshebatza nitkaven lechol belo liftan. Right? If when he broke the bread, his intention was to eat without the relish, tzarich lachazor uvarech. So then he would have to really, right, to bless again. He says, "Wow." Avalim nitkaven lechach eno hefsek. But on the other hand, if you wanted to use the relish, right, then there's no problem. So that's what it hinges on, Did he intend to have the relish with the meal or not? So in this case, we already said, right, they didn't intend to have it. It's just they didn't need it, for the blessing. But says the Rashba, that doesn't matter. As long as he intended to have it with the meal, it's good. Why is that? Because it's a part of the meal, So it's really a part of the process, more or less. Even though it's not a necessity. That's what he's saying. Okay, nice. So let's move on. So it's even if he had the best bread in the world, right? Tastiest stuff in the world. But maybe he doesn't like to eat plain bread. He likes to have some relish. Right? We all have our relish, right? Right, according to the culture you live in. In Israel, right, the most famous relish, you know what it is, right? Hummus. Without hummus, you can't eat a meal in Israel, right? It's like, if they didn't bring you the hummus, that's not a meal, that's a joke. you know? So, right, every culture has their little relish there. That's the way it is, right? So, that's what we're talking about. Okay, so then he goes on. So he says, I'm leaning to say also another thing, which is that if he had before him some salt or relish, ונתן דעתו על ליפתן אחר, but he had his mind on a different relish, right? He had hummus, but he really wanted tchina, Those are the two big Israeli things, right? So, right, so then he said, right, okay, bring the other one now, right? So he said, that's not an interruption. Why? Because he didn't have the relish that he really likes, Let's put it this way. He didn't have the relish that he relishes. Double entendre, right? So that's why he wanted the other one. So Rashba says that's okay. Because he likes the other one. That's all right. We'll let him slide on that one. Okay. ואמר הביאו לפניו בלתם פלוני, נראה לי שאין הפסק שאין הדעות שוות בין החלטן. ומאכלן. יש מי שערב לו לפתן זה, right, so he says, not everybody likes the same thing, you know? Right, some people like hummus, some people like tchina, right? And there's all kinds of other things in between, right? Whatever, right? Whatever you like to eat, whatever it is. So that's the end of the tshuva of the Rashba. Okay. A lot of logic there. Yeah. Hard to argue with the good reasoning like that. So, ודבריו על פי דת רבתא דבאוד שתהא השיחה צורך פרוסת המוציא דווקא דאילו לדעת הרמב"ם. So he says, Bet Yosef, he qualifies this now, right? He says that the words of the Rashba here are according to those rabbis that they require that speech that you had there, you spoke, should be in need of the bread. Dafka, the ilu ledat, because ledat Rambam. But he says, whereas, according to the Rambam, who holds differently, even if his intention was to eat without relish, since he changed his mind and said, have you liftan, bring a relish, he said, why would you have to go back and bless, right? So he said that would be also a need. So he says, we already decided that we paskin like the Rambam, he says. So if that's the case, right? For us, the tshuva of the Rashba here is not really so relevant since it hinges on a premise that we don't hold by. That's the whole thing. Okay, very nice. So that was Vav and Zayin. Okay, so we'll do Shulchan Aruch, Vav and Zayin. So right, so I guess it's this one. It says like this: Lo yivatzea ad sheyaviu lefanav melach, right? Don't break the bread, as we said, right, until they bring the salt or liftan or the relish. Lelafet bo prusata betzia, in order to accompany the bread. ואם היא נקיעה או שהיא מתובלת בתבלין. So he says, right, if the bread is already clean, nice and good, quality bread, or it has spices, right? So it's flavored well, or milach ken shelanu, right? Or it has salt, right? Like our bread. Or his intention was to eat, stale bread, whatever, dry bread. So if that's the case, then he doesn't have to wait for anything, right? He doesn't really need that. So, doesn't need relish, doesn't need salt, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, so this Shulchan Aruch we already did. So we'll go to the next one. But just I'll review, what the Rama says here because it's a good thing to know, right? So he says, Nevertheless, it's a mitzvah to have always salt on the table, right? So you don't want to give that up, You want to follow that track, right? That's why, if you go to like an Orthodox Jewish home, you probably will always find, right, on the table, some, salt shaker or something. Something like that. Because they know, right? This is like, it's a thing. It's a thing. So, right, it's like, you have the altar and you have your sacrifice, right? The table is compared to that. So they say, right, the table atones for you just like the altar. That's what you should have salt there. So don't remove the salt, right, and put it into your, put it into your, pantry, right, whatever, or put it into your, shelf, right, whatever. Keep it on the table. At least a little bit, right? Something there. Okay. So then it says the Rama, so it guards a person from punishment. That's a good thing. You want that, right? We all want that. We want to be guarded. So there you go. So then, right, it goes on. Eat right away, right, and don't interrupt between the blessing and the eating, right? As we said, right, don't talk at that time. That's not the time to be talking. If he did talk, he has to bless again, right? Unless he's talking about something, which has to do with the blessing, right? Or whatever, or the meal, whatever it is. Like he's told them, bring the salt, bring the relish, bring the hummus. Come on. תנו לפלוני לאכול. Or, right, another thing which could be also, he says that he says, right, like this. He says, give this guy his plate. He didn't get his plate, He didn't get his portion. You didn't give him his his dinner there. You can say that too. But the avad, we don't want to say any of these things. So again, right, to reiterate, we're talking about between the blessing and the eating, not between the washing and the blessing, right? That in that time, you are allowed to talk, right? As we said, it's just like a chumrah, not to talk, whatever. It's more like a chumrah. But after you already blessed the blessing, hamotzi lechem min haaretz, so then you really shouldn't talk, right? But if you did b'diavad, so then we apply this rule to it. Also, another thing you could say is that, give the animals to eat, right? Because he's supposed to feed his animals before he eats himself. So that's also a valid, right, a talking point that he could deal with here. I remember, when I was in Yerushalayim, there was a certain rabbi, a good friend of mine who used to invite me for Shabbat. So, I remember, when he would come in to the table, we would come, from shul together, pray together, come there. And what he would do is, before he started the meal, he would go to his aquarium, right? He had an aquarium, and he feed his fish first. Oh, right. in order to fulfill that mitzvah, right? First feed your animals and then eat yourself. So the first thing he did was not to go to the Shabbos table. First, he went to the aquarium. That's the way. Okay, that's a good lesson for everybody. If you have animals in your house, okay. So yeah, that's the story. So if he said one of these things, b'diavad, he doesn't have to bless anymore, because b'diavad, he's okay. Right? So says the Rama here, Mikom Makom, lechatchila lo yafsik la, right? It says he mentions the Rama, right? As we said, this is only b'diavad, but lechatchila do not do this. Right? So he says another thing is that which we said, right? You have to go back and bless again. If you spoke, that's only if he spoke before, right? The one who made the blessing, the broke the bread, didn't taste the bread yet. Because if he did, then it's you don't have to go back and um, and bless again. And the reason is because since he already tasted the bread, it's already considered like it's done already. You've overcome the hurdle. Okay, let's move on. ויצאו כולם באכילת בצע. כי הם צריכים כולם לאכול מן הפרוסת הבצע, right? So it says not everybody needs to eat from that, right, that when he breaks the bread. רק שעושים כן לחיבוב מצווה. Unless they're doing it for right, for the respect for the mitzvah, love of the mitzvah. So that's an interesting thing, right? What he's saying here, the Rama. Which is that, this, by the way, we knew it applies to Kiddush. But says the Rama, it also applies to Hamotzi. So let me explain to you what that means. He's saying like this, right? That just like when it comes to Kiddush, right? When you're making Kiddush, with a family, so what happens is that sometimes not everybody drinks, from the wine. You're not obligated to drink from the wine. Only if you want to, right? You want to show love for the mitzvah. So only the one who blessed has to really drink, but not anybody else. Unless they want to, right? As we said. So, but the custom is to drink, because, as we said, right, for this purpose. But not no obligation. So anyway, what he's telling you now is that just like when it comes to the Kiddush, that when he blesses, right, the head of the household on the Kiddush, you're not really obligated to drink from that wine. Same thing with the Hamotzi, right? When the head of the household blesses on the bread, you're not really obligated to eat it at that point. So then what? So you know what that means? That means that whenever you feel like eating bread, during the meal, you can eat it. You've already said you have fulfilled your obligation, but you're not allowed to, you're not obligated to eat it at the time when he blessed. That's what he's saying, right? Which is a nice, interesting thing to know. Okay, very good. So we'll go to the next one. Let's just make sure we did the Bet Yosef here. So, yeah, so this tour we already read. Let me just see if we read the Bet Yosef. No, we didn't read this. So I'll read it now. So first of all, right, the tour said, "Haseuda mevorech." Sorry, 1 second. Yeah. V'im shachach ve'achal ve'lo berech lefanav. Hamotzi. Right. So let's say, right, he forgot and he ate without blessing hamotzi. Yeah, actually, we didn't read this yet. This happens, by the way, sometimes. You wash your hands, and all of a sudden, right, you take like a bite out of the bread, and you forgot to make hamotzi. It can happen to anybody. So what do you do, right, in a case like that? That's the question, right? So says the tour, what you do is you bless now, right? You're still eating, aren't you? So if you're still eating, more bread, so bless now. And then you're good, right? You're good to go. That's how you solve the problem, Obviously, that's only b'diavad. You shouldn't do that, obviously, to miss the blessing or whatever, but it happens. So now he says, furthermore, right? But if let's say he didn't remember until he finished the meal, right? So there's no more bread to eat now. That's it. He's done. So then he's not going to bless, right? That's it. He can't bless anymore, huh? Since you're not eating anymore. Obvious. You can't bless on the past, right? You're blessing on the future. Kachi maskerat Gemara, right? So he said that's the conclusion of the Gemara. Besot perek shlosha sheachlu in the Gemara there, right? In Brachot. Nun Aleph Amud Aleph. Katava kolbo, says kolbo, igamar seudate v'la lemechal tefe. So he says, let's say he finished his meal and he can't eat anymore, right? He's full already. That's it. Lo livarich, right? Then he shouldn't bless anymore. That's the way he words this halakha. A little bit different than the wording we saw before. So now he explains, right, what the difference is. So it implies from these words that if he's able to eat a little bit more, even though he doesn't want to, he should, right, eat a little bit more in order that he can bless now. I personally don't see the logic of that, my humble opinion, but let's see what he says here. So is this according to, it could be fitting to the opinion of the Ravad? Same thing, similar thing he says, right, regarding a person who, let's say, right, didn't make a blessing on a drink, and he drank something. But he says the poskim don't agree with him, right? Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. It's not really, an accepted opinion here, this thing. Like it says over there in the chapter 172. So he says, therefore, the rule is, even if he's able to eat more, he does not have to push himself to do that. Now, anybody can tell me the logic why he shouldn't do that? It's pretty logical. Okay, so I'll help you. The logic is like this, okay? You already ate the whole meal. You didn't bless, you forgot. Whatever it is, right? You were, probably, distracted with something. Whatever it was, right? So whatever it was that distracted you, right? You want your whole meal, and you didn't bless. So now you're full, right? So now, right, comes this rabbi and tells you, the kolbo, you know what? If you can eat a little bit more, come on, go for it, and also make a blessing. Do that, it's good for you. Why? Because, after all, you didn't bless before, so now you're like doing a makeup, You're making up the blessing. Oh. Does that sound logical to you? I tell you it doesn't, right? Why? Because the fact that you're blessing now on what you're eating, right, doesn't solve the problem, for all you ate before, then you didn't bless. It doesn't fix that problem. That's already done deal, The milk was already spilled, you know what I mean? What can you do? Don't cry over the spilled milk. What are you going to do with it, So that doesn't really help you in any way. The fact that you're blessing now, because it's not going on what you ate before. So then what are you doing it for? By the way, there's also another problem with this, with this approach. The problem is? The problem is, that you're not really hungry now and you're blessing on something, So it's not really proper to do that. You don't really want to eat. So you're trying to force yourself to eat more, and to make a blessing. So it defeats the purpose already, You're not even hungry at all. So then why do this? What's the purpose of it? So really, the truth is, right, not such a hot idea, this idea. That's why Yosef says, right, we don't pass like that. Okay, good. You get the point. I hope you get the point. Okay, so let's see Shulchan Aruch, right, and we'll see what he's got to say about that. Right, so here we go. So it says, Reuven Shaya Notel Yadav Lachil, right? This Reuven, right? He was washing his hands to eat. Yeah, this one we already did actually before. But I'll just read over it again. This is not the one we just did now. It's like something we did before. But anyway, it's good to review. Why not? It doesn't hurt. No prohibition to review. So, so it says, right? Reuven Shaya Notel Yadav Lachila. Right? Reuven was washing his hands, right, to eat. And then Yaakov, right, jumped, really quickly before he got a chance to wash Reuven and mix hamotzi, right? So he was also, right, mitkaven l'otzir shomim. So he was intending to, right, make this blessing for everybody, including Reuven. And then, right, Reuven, what he did was, right, afterwards, he blessed Netilat Yadayim. Lo ha'be'efsek, it's not going to be an interruption. So therefore, right, he does fulfill his obligation with the blessing of Yaakov. And therefore now, he doesn't need to make the hamotzi again, right? So what does he do? Just start eating, after you wash your hands. Because you already, right, made the amen before. For right, the other guy's blessing, right? We'll call him Shimon, right? Shimon. It's a convenient, right thing, right? But the truth is over here, he doesn't call him Shimon, he calls him Yaakov. So let's stick to the program, okay? We'll call him Yaakov. No Shimon, forget about Shimon. Right? So Yaakov, there's Reuven and there's Yaakov over here, right? Like father, like son. So therefore, right, there's no problem over here. The blessing that Yaakov made for the Hamotzi fulfilled the obligation of Reuven, even though he washed his hands afterwards. And he made the blessing also, Netilat Yadayim. It's not considered to be an interruption. That's what we're saying. Okay, if you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, I'm moving on to the one we just did now, right? We're coming to the current bit Yosef here. This is the absent-minded guy, right? Shachach ve'achal ve'lo berech hamotzi. So he says like this, right? As we said, he forgot to bless hamotzi and he started to eat, Boom, 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 boom. Right? Munch, 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 munch. Im nizkar betoch haseuda mevarech. If he still remembers during the meal, he should still bless, right? Because he's still eating, you know? Ve'im lo nizkar. He doesn't remember until he finished the seuda. Then he doesn't bless anymore. That's it, right? As we said, right? And don't do this trick, you know? Yeah, force yourself to eat a little bit more. And then make the blessing. Be a hero, you know? You're not being a hero by doing that. You know? So forget about it. Just say Birkat Hamazon, right? And go back to your life. That's it. That's what you got to do. Okay, so yeah. All right. Just as a piece of good advice, by the way, when does this happen to a person, you know, that he forgets to make a blessing like this or things like that? What causes this kind of a behavior? From my experience, you know what causes it? When a person like kind of like loses his temper a little bit, you know, gets a little bit angry or whatever, or frustrated, you know. So what happens is that makes him forget he loses his concentration and he loses his memory, you know, and that's what happens sometimes. You forgot to make a blessing, right? You forgot to do this, you forgot to do that. Why? Because you're all upset, you know, and that's what's causing you this problem. So therefore, right, the golden rule is, you know, don't get upset, you know, just chill out, you know. Like the Chazal said, you know, one of the negative influences of anger, you know what it is? It makes you lose your wisdom, you know. That's why you forget to bless. You know, oftentimes this is the reason why. You know, or could forget also other things as well. So keep calm. If you want to be successful in Judaism, right? Chill out. Don't get angry at anything. That's a whole book by itself, by the way. You know, the issue of anger. You know, I'm not going to get too deep into that now, right now. But this is one of the problems that it causes. You lose your concentration. So good. So we'll go to the next one. This is an important one to know also. Quite short as well. So let's see if we can let's get into this. So we just did Ted. Now we're going to Ted, right? Okay. So Ted says like this. This is a tour. Right? Oh, wow. So right, the tour says like this. If he has a doubt whether he blessed Hamotzi or not, what should he do? So he brings the Rambam, right? Who says you should bless, you know, even though you have a doubt. So right away, the Beit Yosef jumps on this, you know. Look what he says. So he says his text of the Rambam, he says, is erroneous. Right? The Rambam never wrote this. It says because in our text, it says in the laws of blessings, so there, right, in our text, the Rambam says you don't bless again if you don't remember whether you blessed or not. Which one is the more logical text? You know, for sure the second one, right? Why? Because when there's a doubt about blessings, we don't bless, right? Sapek brachot lekel. It's a golden rule, like ironclad rule in halakha. When you're not sure about a blessing, don't bless the blessing. So the same thing applies here as well. Why is that? Because all these blessings are not from the Torah. They're only rabbinical, So what are you going to do? Right? Do the rabbinical mitzvah of making a blessing and transgress the prohibition of mentioning the name of God in vain? Does that make sense to you? Right? The punishment outweighs the reward. So that you're putting yourself into a ditch here. You don't want to do that. As the Americans say, right? When in doubt, throw it out. Boom. Don't bless, right? Okay. Good.
All good.
Okay. So, לפי מה שהיה כתוב בנוסחת רבנו, but he says, according to the text of Rabbeinu, the two, right? The way he has the text in the Rambam, he says, יש לי תמוה, there's also a wonder about this, שרבנו עצמו כתב בסימן רשת, because he himself wrote in a different chapter, 209, בשם Rambam, שכל הברכות כולם, אם נסתפק, אם ברך, אם לאו. So the Rambam is a general rule, as we said, right? Whenever you have a doubt about blessings, the rule is, you don't bless. So the same thing also applies here, so how did he, right, to get this mistaken text over here, the Torah from the Rambam, right? It contradicts the other place in the Rambam. Right? So, right, he says, therefore, right, the Torah should have felt that, right away, that there's a problem with this Rambam here. Right? It's a corrupted text over here. So, by the way, that would probably insinuate, that the Torah actually didn't write this, probably somebody who copied over the Torah, probably wrote this mistake, it's hard to imagine that the Torah said this himself, because, after all, he was a scholar, I doubt very much he would write something like this. Okay. Oh, so now, right, we have another question, right, which is similar to this question. What about if you have a doubt whether you did Birkat Hamazon? Do you do it again or not? Right? So he says we'll get to that in chapter 184, right, when we talk about Birkat Hamazon. Coming up soon. Right? But I can tell you right now, right, I already know the answer. I won't keep you in suspense. So over there, the rule is, generally, right? There's all kinds of rules there, right? But general rule is that you have to bless again, Birkat Hamazon. If you forgot, if you don't remember whether you said it or not, and the reason is because Birkat Hamazon is from the Torah, so we're stringent more, right? But there's an also exception to that, which is that if you ate, but not to satiation, just ate a little bit, right? So then it's not from the Torah, because the Torah only obligates you to bless Birkat Hamazon. Right? You have to be satiated. If you're not satiated from the Torah, you're not obligated to bless, only from the rabbis. So therefore, in a case like that, you're not obligated to go back and bless. So just so we should know, right, what we're dealing with. But if you are satiated, right, you had a nice filling meal, and so then you do have to go back and bless if you don't remember, because the obligation is from the Torah. Then there's also another issue, right, which is about the women, It's a machloket whether women are obligated Birkat Hamazon from the Torah or from the rabbis, So that also affects this halacha regarding the ladies. We're gonna get into that stuff later on, right? We'll save all that for later. Okay, so anyway, let's move on. The bracha shelifnei hamazon ena min Torah, and that which we said, right, that the blessing of hamotzi is not from the Torah. Even though in the beginning of this chapter, Lamed Hey Mud Aleph, right, in Brachot, Ma'itela bekal v'chomer, it brings it with a kal v'chomer, right, which is a method of deduction, from the Torah. So you may think it's from the Torah because of that. ומה כשהוא שבע ומברך כשהוא רעב, לא כל שכן כבר כתבו שם תוספות, ורשב"א דלאו קל וחומר משהו. So he says that Tosfot and the Rashba said over there in that Gemara that it's not a true kal v'chomer, that one. It's like a quasi kal v'chomer. So it's not from the Torah. That's a whole discussion in itself, right? I'm not going to get into that quasi stuff now, right? That's for a different day. Okay, so we'll do Shulchan Aruch and we'll stop it there, I guess, right? We got something done today, Baruch Hashem. Okay, so let's go out there. Very short, right? Very short and sweet, as they say, right? If he has a doubt whether he said hamotzi or not, right? He doesn't bless again. By the way, there is a solution for this, sometimes. What will be the solution? That somebody who didn't bless hamotzi yet, right, can have you in mind, and fulfill your obligation. That's only, if somebody didn't bless yet. But if everybody already blessed, so then you got nothing, there's no way to fix this problem. Okay, so I guess we'll stop there. All right. Thanks for coming. Be blessed with wealth and health and happiness. And Laila Tov and Bezat Hashem. We should have all good news, right? All kinds of good things are happening for Am Yisrael, right? And Baruch Hashem, it's good. Things are looking up. So hopefully it'll continue, this year to be a good year for all of us. Bezat Hashem. Lots of success and elevation and joy, right? And all kinds of good things. Amen ve'amen. Laila Tov. Chazak u'baruch.
Thank you so much.
God bless.